Can you be my date for one day? The widowed billionaire begged the waitress who reminded him of his wife. What if a single moment could change everything you thought you knew about moving on? David Chen sat alone in the corner booth of Murphy's Diner, the same spot where he'd shared breakfast with his beloved wife and every Sunday for 12 years. 3 months had passed since the cancer took her, and nothing felt right anymore. The coffee tasted bitter, the morning light seemed dimmer, and the laughter from other tables felt like echoes from another world. Then she walked over with a coffee pot. A woman with Anne's gentle smile and the same way of tilting her head when she listened. Her name tag read Grace, and when she asked if he needed anything else, her voice carried the same warmth that used to fill his mornings. For the first time in months, David's heart skipped a beat, not from grief, but from something he'd forgotten existed, hope. Where are you watching from today? I'd love to know in the comments. Grace Martinez had been working at Murphy's Diner for 2 years, ever since her divorce left her starting over at 36 with nothing but determination and her daughter Isabella's college fund to protect. She'd learned to read people quickly, the lonely businessman who needed extra sugar in his coffee and someone to listen, the elderly couple who split one meal but never split the bill, and now this well-dressed man who came in every Sunday looking like he carried the weight of the world. David owned the largest construction company in the state, but success felt hollow when you had no one to share it with. His friends meant well with their dinner invitations and attempts to set him up, but he wasn't ready. And had been his everything, his college sweetheart, his business partner, his reason for building an empire. Without her, the penthouse felt like a mausoleum, and board meetings felt like going through motions. You always order the same thing, Grace observed gently as she refilled his cup for the 3rd time. Anne's favorite. The question caught him off guard. He'd never mentioned his wife's name here. How did you? David started, then noticed the wedding ring tan line on his finger that he still couldn't bring himself to acknowledge. The way you stir your coffee, Grace said softly. Clockwise, exactly 7 times. My grandmother did that. She said it stirred in the love. Her eyes held understanding, not pity, and something in David's chest loosened for the first time in months. Their conversation flowed naturally, Grace sharing stories about Isabella's dreams of becoming a veterinarian, David talking about the community center he and Anne had planned to build but never started. Neither of them noticed how the diner emptied around them, or how Grace's manager kept glancing their way with raised eyebrows. I should let you get back to work, David finally said, though he didn't want to leave. Actually, Grace hesitated, then smiled that smile that reminded him so much of Anne. I'm off in 20 minutes. There's something about you that feels familiar. As David waited in the parking lot, watching Grace through the window as she finished her shift, he wondered if Anne would approve of what he was feeling. The thought both comforted and terrified him. The evening coffee at the small cafe down the street turned into 3 hours of conversation that flowed like they'd known each other for years. Grace laughed at David's stories about construction mishaps, and he found himself genuinely smiling for the first time since Anne's funeral. But underneath the warmth, guilt gnawed at him like a persistent ache. I feel like I'm betraying her memory, David confessed as they walked slowly toward Grace's car. Anne and I, we had this perfect love story. High school sweethearts, built everything together. How can I be sitting here enjoying another woman's company when she's only been gone 3 months? Grace stopped walking and turned to face him. My ex-husband used to say that loving someone meant you couldn't love anyone else. But you know what I learned? Love isn't a limited resource. It grows. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And loved you enough to want you to be happy, didn't she? The question hit him like a gentle punch to the chest, and had made him promise, in those final weeks, not to lock himself away. Promise me you'll live, David. Really live. Don't just exist in our memories. She did, he whispered. But I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to feel something for someone else without it feeling like I'm erasing her. Grace reached out and touched his arm gently. What if you're not erasing anything? What if you're just adding a new chapter? That night, David sat in his study surrounded by photos of Anne, feeling more conflicted than ever. His phone buzzed, A text from Grace thanking him for the lovely evening and hoping he was okay. Such a simple message, but it made him realize something that shocked him. He was looking forward to seeing her again. The next Sunday, Grace wasn't at Murphy's. Another waitress mentioned she'd called in sick, and David felt an unexpected wave of disappointment that surprised him with its intensity. He found himself driving past her apartment complex, the address he'd glimpsed on her work schedule, before catching himself and feeling like a stalker. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. But when he returned to the diner the following week and saw Grace's tired smile light up at the sight of him, David realized he was in deeper than he'd planned. The question was whether he was ready to face what that meant, for Anne's memory, for Grace, and for himself. Grace's apartment was small but warm, filled with Isabella's artwork and photos of their life together. When she invited David over for dinner, nothing fancy, just spaghetti, he felt nervous in a way he hadn't since he was 16 and meeting Anne's parents. Isabella, now 18 and wise beyond her years, studied him with protective eyes before gradually warming to his genuine interest in her veterinary studies. "Mom doesn't date much," Isabella said bluntly while Grace was in the kitchen. "Actually, she doesn't date at all. Says she's too busy taking care of everyone else." David nodded, understanding more than the teenager realized. "She's special." "Yeah, she is. Don't hurt her." The evening was perfect until David's phone rang. Anne's sister Catherine, drunk and emotional on the anniversary of Anne's birthday. "How could you?" she sobbed through the phone. "I saw you at the coffee shop with that woman. Anne's been gone 4 months, David. 4 months, and you're already replacing her." Grace couldn't help but overhear the conversation. She watched David's face crumble as Catherine's words poured out. Accusations about dishonoring Anne's memory, questions about how he could move on so quickly, threats to tell Anne's parents about his new girlfriend. When he hung up, the room felt thick with tension. "I should go," David said quietly. "No," Grace said firmly. "Sit down. Talk to me." "Maybe this is a mistake," David said, his voice breaking. "Maybe I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. We had something perfect, and I feel like I'm destroying it just by sitting here with you." Grace was quiet for a long moment, then she sat beside him on the couch. "David, look at me. I lost my marriage to someone who didn't understand that love isn't possession. Love is wanting the other person to be happy, even when you're not there anymore. Do you think and would want you to be miserable forever?" "No," he whispered. "But it feels wrong to be happy. What if being happy isn't about forgetting her? What if it's about honoring what she taught you about love?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and fear. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. That night, David made a decision that terrified him. He was going to visit Anne's grave and have the conversation he'd been avoiding for months. Whatever happened next, he needed her blessing, or at least his own peace, before he could move forward. The cemetery was quiet in the early morning light as David knelt beside Anne's headstone, his hands shaking as he placed fresh lilies, her favorites, against the marble. For the first time since the funeral, he let himself really talk to her. "I met someone, Annie," he whispered. "And I'm terrified. Not because I love her, not yet, but because I could. Because when I'm with Grace, I remember what it feels like to look forward to tomorrow instead of just surviving today." The wind rustled through the oak tree they'd chosen for this spot, and David almost smiled, remembering how Anne had insisted on a place with shade. "Always thinking of everyone else's comfort," he murmured. "She has a daughter, Isabella. Reminds me of you at that age. Fierce and protective and so smart it takes your breath away. And Grace. God, Annie, she has your kindness. Not your face, not your voice, but that same way of making people feel seen. Feel worthy." A jogger passed by, and David waited until he was alone again. "I need to know it's okay. I need to know that loving someone else doesn't mean I loved you less. Because I can't do this if it means betraying us." When he finally stood to leave, David felt something he hadn't expected. Peace. Not answers, but peace. And couldn't speak to him from beyond, but his heart could finally hear what she'd been trying to tell him all along. Love doesn't end, it expands. His phone buzzed. Grace, texting to check on him after last night's difficult call. Thinking of you today. No pressure, just wanted you to know someone cares. David typed back, would you like to have dinner tomorrow? Somewhere special. I have something to ask you. Grace's response came quickly. Of course. Everything okay? More than okay, he replied. I think I'm ready to start living again. That evening, David called his jeweler, not to buy an engagement ring, but to have Anne's wedding ring reset into a pendant he could wear close to his heart. He wasn't replacing her, he was making room for both loves to coexist in his life. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Tomorrow night, he would ask Grace the question that had been building in his heart since that first Sunday at Murphy's Diner. Not forever, not yet, but for a chance to see where this new chapter might lead them both. The restaurant David chose was elegant but not ostentatious, the kind of place where conversations mattered more than impressing anyone. Grace arrived wearing a simple blue dress that made her eyes sparkle, and when David stood to greet her, he felt that familiar flutter of nervous excitement he'd thought he'd never experience again. You look beautiful, he said, meaning it completely. You look peaceful, Grace replied, studying his face. Something's changed. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing, Isabella's college applications, David's plans for the community center he and Anne had dreamed of, Grace's hopes of maybe opening her own cafe someday. The conversation flowed with the ease of two people who were learning to trust each other with their hearts. Finally, over dessert, David reached across the table and took Grace's hand. I need to ask you something, and I need you to know there's no pressure. No expectations. Grace's eyes widened slightly, but she nodded. This Saturday is the anniversary of the day Anne and I met. For the past 3 years, I've spent that day alone, visiting all our special places, keeping her memory alive. But this year... He paused, gathering courage. This year, I'd like to share those places with someone who understands that loving again doesn't mean loving less. Grace was quiet for a moment, then squeezed his hand. Are you asking me to be your date for the day? I'm asking you to help me turn a day of sorrow into a day of gratitude. For what I had, and for what might be possible again. Tears gathered in Grace's eyes. David, I would be honored. 6 months later, David and Grace stood in the groundbreaking ceremony for the Anne Chen Memorial Community Center, Isabella beaming beside them in her veterinary school sweatshirt. The center would offer job training, childcare, and support services for single parents, exactly what Anne had envisioned, with Grace's practical insights making it even better. She would have loved this, David said, his arm around Grace as they watched children from the neighborhood explore the construction site. She would have loved you being happy, Grace replied, leaning into his warmth. David touched the pendant at his throat, Anne's ring, now transformed into something that connected his past and present. He'd learned that love isn't a betrayal of memory, it's a testament to the capacity for joy that those we've lost helped create in us. That evening, back at Murphy's Diner, where it all began, David and Grace shared coffee and pie while Isabella showed them photos from her first week of college. The booth in the corner felt different now, not a shrine to the past, but a bridge to the future. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales. Sometimes the most beautiful love stories aren't about finding your first love, they're about finding the courage to love again, knowing that the heart has infinite capacity for both remembering and beginning anew. Thank you for joining us on this journey of healing, hope, and the remarkable resilience of the human heart.